My New Normal podcast. I am here with Aaron Snyder, a good friend of mine, an individual I've worked with in the clinic. Had met him through Mobility WOD, actually, a few years ago, and worked with his wife, his lovely wife, who I will never mess with. She's not a Russian spy, is she?
I sometimes think that she is a Russian spy. If you watch The Americans, and there's times I've been just watching The Americans, and I'll look at her and I'll be like, really? It's like, it's okay. You can tell me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
she's not someone I would mess with. It's been an honor to be able to work with Aaron, and I've learned a lot about him through the process, to include his story. He has an invisible wound that he'll tell you about, and something that's been with him his whole life. And the whole premise behind My New Normal is that it's not just one incident that changes us. There's various new normals that we'll have in our life: being a new parent, having an injury, change of work, change of location. But for some of us, there's been some really significant changes that have changed the course of how we have to eat, live, think. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But the most important question we need to ask first, since we met through Mobility WOD,
sure.
If those of you don't follow Kelly Starrett, you're going to want to. I want to know what your favorite mobility technique is.
Oh, God.
And because I think you've done probably all of them that are in the Set the Leopard book.
Yes.
And you're a student of this. So what is your favorite one and why?
Just like a single one.
Your favorite.
I like the pigeon with distraction because, as you know, I am very good at external rotation of the hips, and I just dominate it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, just that I can stick this forehead right into that knee with a flat back.
Nice.
With a band. And it's like,
And so
this is why I can deadlift what I deadlift.
I love it.
Yes.
Yeah, this guy, okay, do you mind telling us how much you weigh and how much you deadlift?
Sure.
Because I think that you're like an adult-sized ant.
Yes.
Like ants are freakishly strong.
I am a hobbit. That is what I call myself. I am 5'6", 165 pounds. Yeah. And I am currently, as a retired powerlifter, deadlifting 455 for 8.
That's sick. Yeah. So that's for 8.
Yes. So I want to get to 495 for 8. And then I'll make an attempt at 500 for 1. So that's once I can do 495 for 8.
2 to 3 times your body weight?
Yeah.
Something like that if I did the math.
Yeah. That's exactly 3 times 495 times 3.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. So you don't really want to F with him, and
I'll deadlift.
He will. Yeah. But he also just crushes it in other parts of his life. But yes, his numbers in the gym are pretty incredible. And you do, so your favorite is the pigeon. I also really enjoy the pigeon. And I wouldn't say extra rotation is my best movement, but I really like the way that one makes me feel, especially after a really good glute med smash.
Yes.
So it makes that one a little bit more comfortable.
Yes, it does.
But for those of you listening that don't understand what we're talking about, so mobility, so the pigeon stretches, just Google it, pigeon stretch. You're going to see some yogi. We're in a yoga studio actually right now, in massage room in South Park. But Google pigeon stretch, and then think about adding a band to that. Actually, we'll put it in the show notes. Think about adding a band to that to distract. The band allows a distraction in the hip joint. So you get this double whammy of goodness in the hip.
Yes.
It helps you when you squat, when you walk, basically doing anything with your hips. So it's a pretty rad.
Pulls your hip away from your body. It's just lovely.
Everyone could benefit from doing a hip distraction. So with that being said, I would say my favorite one is the thoracic rotation with a band. We'll put that in the show notes too. It's one of the ones, so my mid back will feel tight on any given day, but it's something that I can't do the banded one at home. I can do the seated one or the laying down one version of it, but it makes me feel really good, especially being really tall and having a giant child and, always leaning over a table. It really helps me stay, it helps my low back and helps my neck. So, all right, enough of this mobility talk. Let's actually get into this thing. So one of the other cool things. So every time I meet with Aaron, I feel like I've learned something new. So a couple of years ago when I launched my book, I learned that you also had a book. And so what is the name of your book?
It is called The New Diabetes Prescription.
the new diabetes prescription. And I actually have a copy of it, signed copy of it. And so I have been able to go through pieces of it. But one of the things that, so diabetes is one of the most common diseases in our country. Type 2 happens when people lifestyle, they don't take care of themselves, they overweight. There's a number of indicators for it. But Erin also has diabetes. And so I'd like to get into a little bit of the story of, because that's an invisible wound. And also, like, I think a disease is very judged. Like, people don't understand it enough in all the different aspects and can be very judged. Once you hear diabetes, you think, oh, someone's just overweight and like doesn't eat well and didn't take care of themselves. And that's quite the contrary. I've learned too in my practice. So because this whole mission is about talking about these new normals in our life, I want to hear about this invisible wound you've had and when you got it. And yeah, let's just start there.
Sure. Well, I have a very rare type of diabetes. You got type 2, which is about 90% of that's the epidemic. That's the one that's growing. Then you've got the type 1s. The type 1s is where an autoimmune disorder kills off the part of the pancreas that can produce insulin. Type 2s, a lot of stuff has to go wrong. And I can talk all day and night about what the triggers are that makes that classic idea of this obese person who gets type 2 diabetes. They also have a lot of invisible wounds to get there.
Can you name maybe top 3?
Top 3, I will gladly. Emotional eating is the top one, because it's the spark. As I say in my book, it is the spark that lights the diabetic dynamite. If you're not fat, you can't get type 2. You can try damn hard and you might have a really bad genetic predisposition where your numbers are going to be a little elevated, but nowhere near if you're carrying an extra 100 pounds. But that came from emotional eating. That came from overeating. And so there's a person inside who's in pain, because nobody just gains 100 pounds. Nobody just decides that they're going to completely ignore the fact that they're in a physical body. You've got caretakers, the caretaker syndrome, where you got somebody who's taking care of somebody else, and they're giving all their energy to that other person. And then what happens is they feel guilty if they do anything to take care of themselves. They lose sleep. That increases insulin resistance. That's a precursor to diabetes. They don't exercise, of course. That's another one. And they overeat to compensate for the fatigue that they're feeling and just the emotional burden that they're encompassing. One of my former bosses, I know, actually 2 of them, both caretakers, both got this type 2 diabetes that route. So, that's more than 3, but
no, that's okay though. Cause I think that, everyone is so I wouldn't say everyone's at risk, but people need to understand type 2 diabetes is something they can get when they're an adult. And, so the way you're if you're emotionally eating, that's an eating disorder, right? You need that's a way of coping. What are you not coping with? So I think that disease points to poor lifestyle choices in general.
Type 2 diabetes is a symptom of something else. It is a hidden wound that is a symptom of a hidden mental wound, a hidden emotional or psychological wound by far.
Yeah, and those I found with treating. I'm not a psychologist, but even with physical injuries, when people come with physical injuries, there is emotional baggage too that oftentimes comes in with it. And those are sometimes the hardest to treat. So, so there's type 2 and then there's type 1.
Type 1. And then there's something that I have, which has the weirdest name that still doesn't make any sense to me. It's called MODY, which stands for Maturity Onset Diabetes of the Young. WTF. What is that? Why is it called that? MODY. Okay. It's weird. And what it is it's if type 2 is multiple genes going bad triggered by poor lifestyle, MODY is one gene you got from your parents, and then you've got a 50-50 shot. If they've got it, you've got a 50-50 shot of getting it. Have a nice lifestyle, have a bad lifestyle, 50-50 shot.
Wow. Okay.
And of course, certain things that you do can bring it on earlier than later. I was a heavy kid. I was a heavy set kid. I had, and so through lack of exercise, I triggered my diabetes sooner, like a type 2. In fact, they thought I was a type 1, then they thought I was a type 2, then they realized, oh no, you're a MODY. And the reason is because my great grandmother had it, passed it on to her son, my grandfather passed it on to my mother, passed it on to both children. and just a straight shot.
Wow.
Of diabetics.
So you were telling me earlier, your grandmother, so she came over from
great-grandmother
came over from
Russian.
Russian. Okay.
Yep.
And which one of your family members was in the concentration camp? Or
it was my grandfather.
Yeah.
My grandfather wasn't in a concentration camp.
Yeah.
What he did was he was a Russian Jew.
Yeah.
Grew up here in the United States, in Massachusetts. And World War II breaks out, and they hear about what's happening over there. He signs up. He gets a perfect score on his ASVAB, and they estimate he has an IQ of 170. He spoke 8 languages.
Wow.
And they wanted to make him an officer. And he said, no, I want to kill Germans. I want to go straight in there. So he became a paratrooper.
Okay.
And his other job was as a translator.
Okay.
Because he spoke French, German, Yiddish, Russian, English, Greek, Latin, and German. I didn't mention that.
Did you mention
okay.
German? Yeah.
Well, one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Eight total.
8
yeah. So he's going to cover, he's going to cover the European theater with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's good. So anyways, he was liberating concentration camps. As we found out, my uncle found that out through ancestry.com and tracking his war records and requesting them. So this guy comes back seeing some stuff. And he comes back from the war and he passes out. And it turns out that he had diabetes, or he had, this diabetes the MODY had hit him. So stress can, of course, be a trigger. I don't know what the eating was like over there, but it could have been, too good. And so he would have the kind of situation where he died of kidney failure, blind, maybe about 25 years after that diagnosis. But he did a lot to bring that diabetes on. I was told he was also an emotional eater, would just inject extra insulin, chug extra chocolate soda, which apparently was his vice.
Chocolate soda.
Yeah. Wow. The stories of him just rolling over the bed from hypoglycemia. And back then, they didn't have any way to check your blood sugar. They had a way to see what your blood sugar was maybe 3 days ago if it was high. That ain't gonna keep you alive.
Right.
You know what I mean? Every time your blood sugar is going high, you're suffering microvascular damage to your to all your organs. You're making the probability of you going blind or getting kidney problems or dying of a heart attack or a stroke more likely every time that blood sugar goes high. So you can imagine a lifetime of that.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't take much.
So did you, so this is your
This is my grandfather. So great-grandmother, she was in Russia with this, and she had a wooden leg, multiple strokes from it.
Okay.
That was her son.
So this is, so MODY is completely genetic.
Yeah.
And does it present, does it present more similar to type 2 or type 1?
Well, the symptoms, diabetes is the symptom of high blood sugar and everything that comes with it.
Yes.
As such, it presents with those symptoms where you are, the one thing is it's not going to look like type 2 because type 2, you generally have a metabolic syndrome. So you've got usually, a pot belly.
Yeah.
You're going to have higher triglycerides. You're going to have higher cholesterol. You might have higher blood pressure.
Right.
Barring that, though, what are the symptoms of just diabetes? Excessive thirst. You can have weight loss. Some people have weight gain, but that's in the type 2. Right. You can have blurry vision. You can have tingly fingers.
Yeah.
I had tingly fingers, I had blurry vision, I had excessive thirst, and I had excessive hunger. Why do you get excessive hunger? Because you're not processing your food.
Right.
You're literally peeing out your calories. And every time you do that, you're losing weight because you're peeing out your calories, but you're also damaging your kidneys in the process.
Right. Okay. Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, diabetes isn't something I know a ton about. Mm-hmm. And I think for listeners, we've got people who are in wheelchairs, we've got people who have missing limbs, we've got people who've had strokes, traumatic brain injuries. We have people listening who lead companies. Like, everyone should be learning about diabetes. So, but you had a very rare form. And so, and as a child. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us some of the challenges of that as a child? Because when you go over to kids' houses and, people are your parents making you food and hanging out with your friends,
the hardest part about it is getting over the stigma of having to apologize for eating differently.
Right.
That
okay,
is
that's a
the
very good
hardest
point.
part about it, because when you're a diabetic, you tend to fall into one of two camps, and I haven't met one who's this perfect middle blend. You're gonna have people who you look at what they're eating, and you're like, my God, you're diabetic. What are you doing? You know what I mean? I mean, they're just,
Right.
I'll have a double shot of Jack Daniels and some vodka, and here's, my pancakes. And, it's just a touch of diabetes, but it's nothing different from having a sinus infection. I just take these pills and I'm fine. No.
Yeah, you're not found.
you got those types, and they're a lot more fun to hang around.
Right, because
I'll admit it. Yeah, they're a hell of a lot more fun to hang around.
Yeah.
And then you got the people. Yeah. But then we live in the society of this group of people where you have to apologize for sometimes being a bit of a pain in the ass, and I spend a lot of my time, and had to learn to spend a lot of my time not being a burden to other people, where it's like, if I'm going on a business trip, I'm bringing my own Quest bars because I can eat those, and I'm not going to have to stop somebody and say, I need to eat right now. I have hypoglycemia, or something I did 3 hours ago now has me having hyperglycemia. So I ate this. And so growing up, there's times where everybody's having pizza and I'm eating the cheese on top of it, because every time I have the pizza, even though God knows I want to have it, I'm getting all the symptoms of high blood sugar. And then I have this problem where with MODY, you make some insulin, but there can be a delay in when it responds. And just as a precursor, what is insulin? We eat food, then insulin basically eats that food. Right. I mean, just to be real.
And distributes it to the rest of the body.
Yep. In fact, insulin will get excreted at the first taste of food.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons that all that research in diet soda perhaps causing problems with, with metabolic disease, is because if it tastes sweet, your body instantly is excreting some insulin.
It's still the same message.
Yes. So tip, if you're going to have a Diet Coke, have calories with it.
Right.
Don't have it on an empty stomach. Yeah.
Have an avocado.
Have an avocado. Yeah, something. But for me, what would happen is I would eat that food, and then my blood sugar would go too high. My body would say, oh, I guess we should get off our lazy pancreas ass and do something about this. And then just fire insulin at it and then crash.
Okay.
And then I'm passing out.
I see.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So growing up with that kind of a problem, that was not fun at all. And so I learned, I don't want it to be all about me. It doesn't feel good to get attention for having diabetes.
Right.
And so, that comes with its own stigma where, you're kind of trying to hide the fact maybe that you have this, unless you're really pressed about why you're eating the way you're eating, why you're not having that third drink.
Did you try to hide it when you were a kid, or just overly plan food? So you made sure you had snacks and didn't
telling everybody.
You did? Okay.
Yeah. And it was kind of like a badge of honor for a while. And then it's like, this just doesn't, it almost felt narcissistic. And it's like, this isn't who I want to be. Sure. So I'm just going to kind of low key this, and, frankly, they didn't know I had diabetes until I was about 21.
Okay. Oh, okay. So they didn't officially.
Yeah. All I knew was that I felt a hell of a lot better not eating carbohydrates and having no idea why. Just being exhausted from eating anything that had sugar or carbs in it and just having no idea why. Because you have this type of diabetes where you're not presenting heavy. They don't know. And number two, you have some insulin.
Right.
So you're not going to drop 50 pounds and pass out and die. Right. You're just kind of going to be struggling along, not knowing why everybody else has more energy than you.
Right. And so you could it could be like chronic fatigue syndrome, or be like misdiagnosed. Probably. I'm assuming misdiagnosed a lot. Essentially.
It might even be a reason that I'm as short as I am, considering my dad is 6 foot. You know what I mean? Gotta blame it on something.
You are much stronger, like 99.9%.
Way stronger than my dad.
Way stronger than most individuals your size.
True.
So
that's true.
You are an adult size ant that can carry. I have a friend actually who's your size. He doesn't lift as much as you, but I still think he's freakishly strong for his size. So
another hobbit.
Yes. Yeah. Everyone's a hobbit to me. I'm 6'1". So
well, yeah, everybody is a hobbit to you. Except for your husband.
Right. And my brothers who are 6'8".
And your son, as soon as he's about 5,
he's a little over 3 feet tall.
Yeah. So at 5, he's going to be 7, and that's it.
Okay. So I want to know. So growing up, you had this. You told everyone, but you still you realized you felt better not eating carbohydrates and crap.
Yep.
But no diagnosis till 21.
Yeah.
What other challenges did you face? Maybe getting into your college years or years
well, I have dyslexia, and so I did not learn to read till I was 9 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
And so I was repeating kindergarten and not really knowing why. And the way that they figure out you have dyslexia or any type of learning disability is they have to give you a nonverbal IQ test. And what I mean by that is you can't read during this IQ test because they have to figure out, frankly, are you learning disabled or are you Forrest Gump?
Right.
Which one are you going to?
Right.
There's got to be a reason, and we're going to get to the damn reason about it.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a very violent household. I have a brother who is a drug addict, or was a drug addict, and also has bipolar disorder, which is a fantastic combination. So before I even ever learned to read, I watched my dad almost get killed by my brother. He came home on PCP. And you know the type of strength that you get. And so I see him, he's in this chokehold, and my mom gets that type of lift the baby from under the car type of strength. And I just see this 5'1" woman pick this kid off, like 5'11" male, 180 pounds, and just pull this arm away from my dad's throat.
Wow.
And
this, how old were you? I
was 8.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I grew up in that kind of environment. And I was physically abused by him. I was emotionally abused by him.
Your brother?
Yep. Yeah. From a very early age. This guy had 8 years on me. You know what I mean? There's no,
right.
Burned toys, shot me with a BB gun, black eyes.
Yeah.
Almost suffocated me one time.
Oh my gosh. So
almost killed me one time when he was babysitting me. Yeah. It was a nightmare. And so I'm dealing with that at home, and then I'm dealing with dyslexia at school. And going back to this IQ test, a couple things came out of it. I have a very high intelligence quotient, and they could tell that by like the detail that I'm putting on everything. Like I'm drawing like little fans on top of the houses at the age of 5 years old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like but the picture was of the house was on fire. And I'm stuck with my brother on one side banging on a wall while my parents are on the other side. So a psychologist could have had a field day with that.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? But it's like at that age, there's desperation.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
So there
was stress.
So you talked about MODY being happening because of high stress situations.
Stress can certainly make it occur sooner.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. But my coping mechanism is probably what brought it on earlier. And one of the reasons they thought I had type 2 was I was very overweight as a kid because I was emotionally eating. I was having McDonald's 4 nights a week, if not 5. Wow. And if it wasn't McDonald's, it was Carl's Jr. And I was heavy. It wasn't like, oh yeah, we're just bringing you home the McDonald's, but you're just going to burn it off because you're playing. It's like, no, I'm in my room. I go into my parents' room and lock the door. I had a bird. I took the bird in his cage, come home, come into my mom's room, lock the door to protect myself from my brother and his bipolar druggy friends. Mind you, he's got 8 years on me.
Yeah.
They're post-puberty. I'm not in puberty. There's, this is what's going on. And just played with Legos. You know what I mean? And that's just all I did. And that was my upbringing. And then while I'm at school, it was funny. They pulled me out of math class to give me reading help. Mm-hmm. And I was also in the special needs physical education where, I couldn't even throw a ball. Right. So I'm with all those kids. So I was very popular, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure that sounds like it was very hard on all levels, home life, school life, relationship life. But
you don't know it. Yeah. You don't know that your life is hard.
Right.
You don't know. I mean, if you're 8 years old, you've got this life.
You don't know any different.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, by the time I was 11, I remember being envious of other kids who weren't getting picked on at school. Envious of just the kids who were just completely invisible and ignored.
Right.
I wanted to be that.
Yeah.
Because that was way better. By the time that I was 11, I had actually all the boys in my 5th grade picking on me. So it was just from all sides.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're getting it at school, you're getting it at home, and no place is safe. So yeah, I grew up in you know, it was stress all the time, and eating was my way out.
So parents wise in the picture, were they there for you?
I love my parents. But I'll just say what a psychologist that I saw in my teens said.
Yeah.
He was very angry about it. He said they could have done a lot more.
Sure.
To be fair, when you're a mom and you've given birth to a child who's bipolar, and bipolar will present itself at, like, you know, from the get-go, you know, the kid's crying more. Yeah.
Bipolar.
The kid's crying more. Don't pull that fire alarm at the biggest church in Boston. Oh, you know, I'm going to pull that fire alarm. And I'm 4 when I'm doing this. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And you're that kind of a person, and you're coming home and you're getting into drugs, and you're getting into guns, and you're getting into bombs and stuff where the FBI should be taking you away.
Yeah.
You know, not the police.
Right.
When you've got a kid like that, you want to try to save him. And what she decided was, I've got enough problems to deal with. I know this one's maybe messing with this one, but I'm going to completely forget about it. And I'm just going to not make the Sophie's choice, you know, and kick this one out of the house.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So she kept him in the house.
And here's what's interesting. When 8 years apart, and when he's 20 years old, I finally boot him. And I'm 12 and I'm going into the 6th grade.
Yeah.
I jumped from all the lower level classes to all honors classes.
Yeah.
Between 5th and 6th grade. And I was being treated as smart, where I was treated as stupid.
Yeah.
From like 4 months apart, leaving one grade, entering the next one. And all of a sudden I'm getting 100% on an English essay. Now, mind you, I couldn't read. Right. You know, very well. I only learned to read 3 years before that. Yeah. And then, so you want to talk about, you know, all of a sudden you're dyslexia and you can focus well enough at school because somebody's, you know, this stress has left.
Yeah. This monster that you didn't even know that was your life. Mm-hmm. Wow. So you had a very tumultuous and, otherwise, I mean, a psychologist would say traumatic upbringing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So but I do know people listening may have experienced something similar, whether it's domestic abuse by parents or siblings, or in an environment where they were bullied. Mm-hmm. So now, because working with you, I've been working with you for a few years, and mostly on performance stuff, obviously, and you're someone who I don't know all this backstory about you, but you are extremely accomplished, very humble, very down to earth, and very calm. And so to have such a tumultuous background, like, how did you adapt to that in your later so obviously your brother leaving was a huge perk, but then, I mean, you still had to succeed in school and go to college, and then you got married. Like, did you make any conscious choices after learning, holy shit, like this was my life, and now I have to figure out what to do with that trauma, and I have to move past it? And I'm sure that wasn't easy, but what was that journey like? It
started at the age of 12. The first time I ever had self-esteem was when I started doing well in school. All of a sudden, this was something that I could actually do well at. Yeah. I had never had anything in my life where I had any sense of self-esteem. Imagine that, you know, up until you're 12. I mean, you're pretty psychologically developed in a lot of ways, you know, and then at 12, it's like you're figuring out, oh, wait a minute, if I actually work hard at this, I can actually achieve something, and that feels good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like it's almost animalistic. Right. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of been my whole life, is playing catch up in what other people just take for granted. I don't want to say it like that, but what other people are we're fortunate,
okay. Yeah.
and you know, they understand basic things about life that I got to be honest with you, I've perhaps only recently learned, am maybe learning now, or still haven't learned, and I don't even know what I don't know.
Right.
And I've got a lot of that, and I've got a lot of examples of that going through life, where it's like, oh, you know, you mean, and the next one, by the way, is exercise. I went through a massive depression. Well, let me back up. 12 to 15, doing great at school. 16, I have a near fatal bike accident.
Okay. Yeah.
My bike stopped, but I didn't. And I kept going over the handlebars, and I hit the pavement without a helmet at about, I don't know, 30, 40 miles an hour. Just like, you know, right on, you know, I stood up and I'm trying to fight off the concussion that's trying to take me, you know, literally just, you know, just trying to, you know, fight it with your will. And I lost. So,
head with the pavement.
Doctor said, this is the first time I've seen this accident where the patient's not dead.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, people get spinal cord injuries from.
I'm blessed about that. But apparently this is, I was told, the hardest part of the head. You know, so I can literally tell you I'm very hard-headed. I'm a stubborn SOB, and I'm not going down that way. My brother isn't going to take me out. It's not going to be the pavement. Oh my gosh. But I hit a massive depression after that. And my mom, you know, my brother's out of the house at that point. My mom can kind of start, okay, well, I can deal with the younger one. And she says, you need to see a shrink. And like a lot of teenagers, I'm just like, yeah, I need it, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I'm fine.
Right.
Yeah. But I see this guy, and they stick me on an antidepressant, and I have clinical depression and anxiety from growing up. And it's interesting because you know, I've never been described by anybody as calm. So thank you for that.
Well, I in the clinic, I see that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
I don't work with you at work though. I'm sure you're like, to get where you are, you have to be.
I work on a trade floor. So that's football with numbers. There's a lot of type A's, and there's a lot of stories, but that makes you calm, by the way. Yeah. You know, when you've got some guy who makes a couple $1 million a year screaming, give me a fucking number, you know, and you're going to come up with that number really quickly. You know what I mean? And, you know, I was about the third or fourth person that it's like, you know, he's cutting off one head and they can't deliver the number. The next head comes off. I delivered the number, and that's why I'm here, so you know. Good. But that depression, and this is where we come into movement. Mm-hmm. I was prescribed Paxil. And if you've ever been on Paxil, I'm sorry, because it makes you exhausted. You feel miserable on it. It's just the most blah drug. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky I got off it in about 3 months, and I don't know how much it helped me, because what helped me was I went to the gym.
Yeah. And how old were you when you started going to the gym?
I started lifting weights when I was maybe 14 or 15. And this was the second source of confidence I ever felt. Because remember, I was bullied both at school and at home by somebody I had no power over. Yeah. You know what I mean? If they've got 8 years on you, and this is the kind of kid, he was committed for a time for drug abuse. And he actually tore one of those, with, you know, the old phones, you know, off the wall. So he takes, for his bipolar medication, he doesn't take like lithium. Yeah. He takes something called Tegretol, which is an anti-seizure medication. And what it does is it helps him have pause before going apeshit. This is the kind of kid who he's 49 now. He's 48 now.
Right.
Probably doesn't have it in him anymore, but this is the kind of kid who had the ability to call up adrenaline and just overcome Golgi tendon, you know, and just, tear through stuff. So that's the kind of force that I'm dealing with.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So you couldn't stick up for yourself.
No, you can't. You can lock the door, and there was only one time when he unlocked it, but my parents came home in time.
Oh my gosh. Because you're constantly living in terror.
Yeah. And I got lucky there. But lifting weights became the second source of confidence, because then all of a sudden it's, wait a minute, I don't have to be weak and picked on all the time. I can actually become strong and defend myself, maybe. You know, and this is just this kind of realization. This might be completely intuitive to everybody else. For me, it was mind-boggling. It was like, wait a minute, I don't have to feel like this all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's something I can do about this.
Yeah.
You know, I read the other.
Did someone like introduce you to it, or did you just find it on your own?
My brother had an old weight set. He had moved out. He had an old weight set, and he left it.
Okay.
And I just picked it up one day, and it felt good.
Nice.
That was it.
Then you just kept going.
Just kept going. You know, actually, I was told lifting weights maybe saved my life, that I didn't break my neck, because I was lifting weights at home right before that bike accident.
Oh,
so
wow.
and I was back in the day doing shoulder shrugs, or those upright rows that we all know not to do. But I was doing them, in my nice strong traps. So
nice.
with that pavement.
Survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, fitness. So coping wise, just your brother leaving is a huge important thing to happen in your life, because now you had safety.
Yep.
You basically didn't have one of the most important human needs for a long time, which was being safe.
No, there was no safety.
And maybe even that equated to love, like no one was sticking up for you. Like
that's another point.
In your family life, as much as
that's a good point.
Your parents, I know parents love their kids, but there is some unskillfulness that happens when like they haven't done. So when people don't do internal work, not just your parents, but you think about just humans, when you don't do your own internal work and work on yourself and get to know yourself, work on your own demons, then it's going to be carried over into your family life.
Yep.
And so the things that you're afraid of and can't cope with, well, that's going to play over into how you raise your children, how you treat your husband or wife.
Yep.
So yeah, like you didn't have some basic human needs.
That's true.
Growing up.
That's true. And, it's interesting. Two things about that is, one, to this day, I do have a hard time relying on anybody else doing anything for me. And it probably comes from the fact that I didn't, I didn't have that growing up,
Well, so that's all of those things happening growing up, those are in your cells. Trauma can stay in the cells. And it doesn't mean that trauma, and for those, trauma doesn't mean you have to have that the rest of your life and it has to ruin your life. Because there is a certain point, like after an injury or even being abused, hopefully living after this abuse, like your body will recover. Your mind will recover to some degree, but there's a choice whether you can maladapt or adapt. Yeah. And you have a choice there after a certain point of like, okay, you have the community around you, your tissues have healed, right? You're healing. You're making the best choices possible about living a good lifestyle, but then you have choices to even optimally adapt. And that might mean getting the heck out of Dodge or changing your life completely. Yep. Right? Getting around people who love you, forming friendships that are wholesome, that maybe have what you never had. And or people have the choice to maladapt and say, my life sucked. I had so much trauma growing up, and I this happened to me, and I'm just going to exist. And maybe people don't necessarily make that choice, but the way they live their life, it shows that. Yep. So it's very impressive about this is like you didn't know that you were growing up with a monster. Nope. You knew he was a monster, but you didn't know if that was normal or abnormal, because that was your normal. That's your normal. Then you don't know. But now, and then you finding fitness just from someone who traumatized you, his things, you found fitness in that. And then you found, intelligence through letting go of that you weren't in this like fight or flight state every day coming home. So now your brain could actually be receptive to what you were learning. So you've been in fitness since what, the age of 16?
I've been lifting weights, for since a long time. 14, 15 years old. Let's say 15. Yeah. So fitness basically saved your life. Yeah. Yep. And seems like the main coping mechanism now. Yep. So you're very committed. What, 6 days a week, 6 days a week? I'm lifting 5 days a week, and I'm doing mobility all 7. Yeah. Because mobility is where it's at. Yeah. So mobility, for those of you that don't know, it's the self-care aspect. And you appreciate Jill Miller's work. Jill Miller from Yoga Tune-Up. We had a conversation the other day too, and talking about, I appreciate mobility. Yes, I appreciate it for a range of motion and doing self-care to improve lifts and warm up. But I also appreciate doing mobility for emotion, improving emotion. So using those yoga tune-up balls or different tools to help mobilize tissue for
That's self-care.
Mm-hmm.
I'm advocating for myself. I'm spending time on myself, which is
Yes.
what you're doing 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't something that you grew up learning. That's just now an
No.
intuitive thing that you need, because no one else is going to give that to you.
Nobody. The only thing I was doing for myself was overeating. Pudding pops, ice cream, Entenmann's fat-free, you know, and McDonald's. And, you know, here's the other interesting thing about fitness and diabetes is I, you know, lifted weights, but I was a binge eater. Mm-hmm. And so I was carrying extra weight, and that's what allowed this diabetes to perpetuate. Because even though, you know, by the time I was 21, I was a big guy. I was maybe 190 pounds, you know, and it was fat and muscle, you know, and I have a friend who does a finger stick. She recognized all the symptoms of diabetes, and it was like, oh no, crap, I've got it. But here's the thing. I grew up hearing about all these horror stories about this great grandmother with a wooden leg, about a blind grandfather who died, who had, you know, kidney disease. And what a raging asshole he was, by the way, when his blood sugar was low. He was bipolar.
Right. Okay.
So that's where, it runs in my family.
Okay.
It runs in my family. So I have these bad examples of what will happen to me if I keep binge eating, if I keep my coping mechanism. Right. My coping mechanism has a cost. Do you know how blessed I was to get those stories growing up? Because how many binge eaters do you know who have a lifetime of it, who can never overcome it? I know you've had your own battle with overcoming it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have your own story about that. But let me tell you what a blessing it was to find out that this was not okay. Because there's a lot of kind of chubby 21-year-olds who eat like shit. But all of a sudden in my life, it wasn't okay anymore. Yeah. So this behavior.
Because you saw what you could become.
Yeah, I was, it's like, hey, as far as I'm concerned, you know, I became fluent in Spanish in a year. Just, you know what I mean? So did my brother, by the way. His IQ was tested. He was almost a genius when he was in that, when he ripped the phone off.
Wow.
You know? So, you know, we are this guy, Boris was his name, Russian. And so it's like, you know, to identify with that and then to say, I need to not identify with that. I need to not be that person. Right. If I have that tendency to be that much of an asshole, I need to not be him. Right. And if I have that sweet tooth and I act on it, I need to not do that.
Right. Yeah, because it's going to ruin your life over time, to kill you.
Yes. And it's like, that's where you're going. So
everyone that's maybe listening that has type 2 diabetes or is pre-diabetic.
Or a binge eater.
Or a binge eater. Or has an eating disorder.
Yeah.
It's very easy to rationalize as someone who's I had bulimia, and so I was so good at rationalizing the behavior, like, just this time, like I'm young and fit, nobody can tell, you know, for me. And
woe is me, I've had a hard life, I'm gonna binge eat. That was me.
Yeah.
You know,
so it's easy to do that, but if you really sit down and ask yourself, it might take time for you to like come to this realization, like, what do you want from your life? Like, if you look at your family,
it's a sobering moment.
It's a sobering moment. What do you want with your life? Yeah. Do you really want to be overweight? Do you really want to end up like these people who have the same behaviors? Do you really want to be binging and purging 6 or 7 times a day? Do you what do you want? I want a family. I want to be happy. Well, those behaviors don't create happiness. They're abuse to the self. And, you know, I had my aha moment when I was in Iraq. So just from my father, who was the one man who I was dating someone at the time, but wasn't really an important guy in my life, to be honest. Like, I knew that relationship wasn't gonna last. And my dad was the one that he'd already lost someone. He lost my mother. And I was out there in a war zone, like binging and purging and choosing to do this behavior, but also feeling very out of control because it was my way of coping. I felt so out of control that I needed the control of eating, but in a way it was a more out of control feeling I had after I did the symptoms of binging and purging. So, but it was my dad who kind of put a stone in my shoe, like, the only person that's going to get you out of this is yourself. Like, you're going to hurt someone else or you're going to hurt yourself. Like, it's not the war that you should be worried about, it's yourself. And it was like a hard look in the mirror to say, the only thing keeping me here is my ego, thinking that I am the only one that can do this job. Like, the Marine Corps is a big green machine. They've got people coming through all the time. And the biggest strength I can give myself and my future self that I want to be happy is asking for help. But I resonate with your story in some ways, and I know other people will. And the ability for you to like look at your situation and not know maybe that it was traumatic. Maybe years later you figured out like, wow,
it's way later that you figure out that what you had was not normal.
Yeah, but then you're like, you chose to find fitness. You chose to stick with it. You chose to. People can still look at family members that are sick, right, and say, just continue down doing their behavior because they don't want it bad enough.
Yeah,
they don't want it bad enough. But you didn't do that. You felt what it felt like to feel fit. You felt what it felt like to be smart.
Yeah.
And
those were just drugs of another kind.
Yes. Good drugs.
Good drugs, just endorphins. And by the way, one of the reasons I didn't do drugs because I saw what it did to my brother.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that would be another avenue you could have gone down.
So food was my drug.
Right. And food can be a very lethal drug.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a slow killer.
Yep.
So now you're married with a child.
Yep.
And so what does your coping look like now? I mean, you're training.
Yeah, I lift my weights. I eat food that makes me feel good, that allows me to do my job. I work in a high performance environment where I have to be crunching out numbers, and I'm making these machine learning forecasts that an oil company is capitalizing on for profit. So, they have to be, mathematically precise, correct. And there's money on the table and it has to be done every day. The weightlifting helps me. Getting enough sleep helps me, but still remembering what you care about when the days you don't get enough sleep helps you. My family. And, it's funny because you said, you're calm. I'll tell you why. My wife. Yeah. Because my wife grew up in Russia, came here, has her own story of adversity that she had to overcome, worked her way through college, very hard worker, very take no shit kind of woman, very strong, very mentally strong. And I love that about her. And she loves that I'm mentally strong because we can't walk over each other. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's just, it's like, well, let's just disarm here. Yeah. But she made it very clear to me during the times when I would have emotional shit fits that was not okay. Right. And I had to, because I love her, and love is one of the positive ways that people can change. Yes. Most people change for negative reasons, but I am here to tell you, you can change for positive reasons. Right. Love is the only way it's going to happen. Right. But I did learn to control a lot of my angry outbursts because of her. Yeah. That's awesome. Meditation helped. Getting help from my dyslexia helped. Because what people don't realize about dyslexia is it's not a reading problem. You can think of it as a visualization problem. You can think of it as basically the way that you literally see the world. One of the reasons my spatial IQ is higher is because of my dyslexia. Right. Yeah. But that's not good for reading. Yeah. You see the world differently. Yeah. So I went through something, when I tried to learn to ski, I realized I had dyslexia. Again, that it was still bugging me because I couldn't learn to ski to save my life. I probably spent 4 times the amount of a regular person on skiing lessons. It was bad. And then when I got good enough, my wife said, "No, you're not entering Russian school of skiing. You go down the mountain and you live, you can ski." Yeah. That's so good. Yeah. And no, her voice isn't that Russian. It's just that this is the cartoon version of my wife's accent. She's wonderful. But learning to control that dyslexia and the eye visualizations that they teach you so that you can just read, which by the way is awesome. There's another thing I took for granted, oh wow, I can read. Right. One of the reasons I was a math major, there's no reading. Right. You know what I mean? If you can understand it, you can do it. So now you know what I mean? And now, I can actually, read and actually understand, and there's nouns and verbs and periods and beginnings of sentences and ends to them. It's all very interesting. Yeah. Reading, not underrated. It's a skill that you don't take for granted. It's a skill I don't take for granted, but it helped me. A lot of my anxiety, I didn't even realize maybe it was triggered neurologically when you're in that dyslexic mindset, that this something called the Davis Dyslexia program that I actually paid out of my own pocket.
Yeah.
You know, to
do.
It helped me at work, but it also, my wife even says, she says, you're different.
Nice.
You know, after this. So that helped. You know, again, that's taking control of something.
Yeah,
most people think dyslexia is a life sentence. It's just this thing you can't do anything about. Oh, you're just going to be stuck here. There's a book on dyslexia called Smart But Feeling Dumb that pretty much sums it up.
Got it. Okay.
Another thing that you can do something about, but at a very early age, one of the reasons that I think I have strength as an adult is because I have this mindset that we can do something about whatever it is that is plaguing us.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. There is something that can be done.
There's
You may not be 100%. And by the way, there's no such thing. You may not be as good as somebody else that you think about, but let me tell you, they're suffering in some other way.
Right.
But you can definitely feel better and have a higher quality in your own life and create a higher quality of life for those who have to interact with you by doing something about
your stuff.
Taking ownership.
I agree. And I thank you for sharing all that, because I think we all have our demons. Some people listening may have grown up with a similar background to Aaron, and or have an eating disorder, or be addicted to drugs, or be in a wheelchair for a spinal cord injury, whatever it is. No matter what it is, that doesn't give you an excuse to not take care of yourself and not be healthy. True. Nothing that yes, things in life, there are things in life that will happen to you that you can't control.
True.
But it's your reaction to it that matters the most.
Yeah.
And knowing that, like, for, some of the people I've interviewed who've had spinal cord injuries, they moved out to San Diego to be part of the wheelchair community here. They physically had to put themselves in a situation that would help them thrive. If you have diabetes, if you have dyslexia, or any other learning disorders, it's not a life sentence.
No, there's things ways that can be done.
Cope.
This is the 21st century.
And there's a way to have a really good life.
Yes.
And it comes down to a choice. Choosing who you marry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Choosing who you surround yourself by, like friends. Choosing what you do for work. Like, are all those things helping you cope? And not using that person as a crutch, but using them as a person who, like, legitimately, this is a wholesome person that I want to spend my life with. Like, these are really good. I interviewed a doctor who researches resilience. She's got stage 4 terminal cancer, breast cancer. You can learn resilience just by what you said, taking ownership of your health. Like, you just take those steps forward. Like, you want a better life. So start creating that better life.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, you don't have the defenses. You have to rely on your parents, maybe older siblings. But once you have that choice, and once you realize it, maybe through a teacher or someone, or asking questions, don't stop asking questions, you'll find ways.
Yeah.
So a couple more questions before we wrap up,
mm-hmm.
because what advice would you give to a young person who may be in your same shoes when you were young?
When I was young, I mean, from the abuse state, or
from growing up in a household of domestic abuse with brother, father, parent.
I would encourage, if you can get away from it, which is you can't. So I'll say this: 2 things. Do what you can to minimize contact.
Mm-hmm.
Even if this feels chicken shit, it's not. Do whatever you can to make sure that you are not going to be the center of any abuse.
Yeah.
Whatever you can do, because you're in a survival situation.
Right.
And if you can get away, God bless you, get away.
Yeah.
If you can take a self-defense course.
Yeah.
If you're in a position where you can kick the shit out of your abuser, please do so.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, seriously, sure. If I was in a position where I mean, my brother's lucky that I wasn't, but I mean, seriously, if you're in a position where you can overcome that aggressor, that person that should not be, and you don't have, I'm not saying, God, just to make sure legally, I am not saying hurt anybody. I'm not saying, kill anybody, but if you can make a person no longer make you their target.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah. So if you're in a situation as a young child, or anyone who, even not even a young child, someone who's in an abusive situation, like ask for help from someone you trust.
Yeah.
And if the parents, right, sometimes they're your parents, but they might not be able to help you.
Yeah.
So teacher, learn how to defend yourself.
Else. Yeah. Somebody outside of you. That is true.
And then get away. But I mean, for you, like that's your protective mechanisms weren't there. And
here's the thing though, because you said something that didn't even occur to me. You asked for help, and that needs to be said, because in my situation, I didn't even realize that was possible. That's outside the sphere of that's outside not knowing what you don't know.
Right.
Realize that, going back, maybe there was somebody who could have helped.
I think as a kid though, so abuse is not uncommon it's not uncommon out there for people in growing up, whether it's a spouse or child. But as a child, I think it's harder because your parents, maybe the parents are the abusers, right? I don't know if it's typically the sibling, but either way, like your parents, if you ask your parents for help and they're the abuser, or they're the one being abused too, they're your protective mechanism. So if you can find a teacher or somebody outside.
For me, it was my parents were enablers. My brother was the abuser.
Right.
So all, your center of trust is just blown to shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why it didn't even occur to me to say ask for help.
Right.
But I like that. You know what I mean?
I think as a kid it'd be hard though. It's like your parents, because what if, as an adult, it's like, of course, that seemed like a logical, even though I didn't want to be seen as weak, seemed like a logical thing. As a kid, if I was being abused, like that person abusing me, like if I tell someone they're going to abuse me,
that's the fear.
So I think I like what you said, self-defense. I learn self-defense, get away if you can, and then ask for help, someone outside that circle who will be able to help protect you.
And the mindset is behind asking for help is realize that what is happening to you is not okay.
Yes.
And this is a problem with them, and there is nothing wrong with you. Once you can make that mental shift that there's nothing wrong with you, that it's on them, you're going to feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
About, well, if it gets them in trouble, so be it. They shouldn't have been doing it to you in the first place.
Right. Exactly. That's a really good point. Don't take the victim mentality.
Yeah. You can't be a victim.
So last question is, with all of this that you've been able to like cope and manage, because I know it's not just I've arrived, like I feel I'm amazing.
Yeah.
Right. You're still dealing with this stuff on probably a daily basis of just coping. And so what does your new normal essentially now look like on let's say a typical day? Like what does your day look like?
On a typical day, my work starts at 5:30 in the morning because I work on New York time.
Okay.
And I get out at about 1:30. I work a straight 8 hours. Sometimes I take work home, but I get to do that on the computer.
Right.
I immediately go to the gym. I come home. I make all the meals for my family, for my son, for my wife. And that's kind of the division of labor. She washes clothes. I got fired from washing clothes years ago.
I like it. It creates a happier household when the man and wife. The man and
fired. Yes. But I cook meals.
Okay.
I spend some time with my son, help him with his homework. I spend time with my wife. I go to sleep between, around 8:30, 9 o'clock because of how early I'm getting up, and I get up and I do it again the next day. And, in between that time, I'm managing everything that I need to do in life. If I have to go to doctor's visits, if I'm currently dealing with some sort of weird gastrointestinal issue, I'm dealing with it. I'm not being a victim to it, and I'm just adapting to whatever comes my way on a daily basis. And what I'm really working on right now is learning just to relax and try to enjoy life, because every day it's happening. It's not that I'm going to get it all right one day and then life begins. No, life's happening right now.
Yeah.
So you better just enjoy this. If this is what you're doing, you obviously, nobody's making you doing, I'm at a point where I'm doing what I like to do. I better just sit back and just be aware.
Enjoy it.
Well,
that's what creates, a lot of research shows that the more focused you are with what you're doing right now, it could be anything. The more focused you are in the present, the happier you are. And we get caught up in like the striving for, when I'm fitter, or when I'm retired or when this happens, I'll feel better.
Nope.
You know, you got to work on it right now.
No.
So thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
And thank you for sharing, being vulnerable about your story, because I know you're not alone. And the whole point of this is like, you can create a new normal in your life, and you can create a really amazing new normal no matter what the trauma you've experienced.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
No, you're very welcome.
It's an honor. So long. Oh, real quick, where can we find you? If people want to email you, what's your...
You can email me at I'm going to go on my personal email address. I don't care.
Yeah.
A_SNYDER12@hotmail.com.
Okay. And we'll put that in the show notes. It's A_Snyder.
Yep. 12@hotmail.com.
Okay. You got it. You guys should email him.
Thank you.